He looked her dead in the eye and said, "You're leaving this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Absolutely nothing." For 10 years, Richard Sterling thought he owned his wife, Catherine. He controlled her finances, isolated her from her family, and convinced her she was worthless without him. When he dragged her to court to finalize a brutal divorce, he thought it would be a slaughter. He had the high-priced lawyers. She had a public defender. But Richard forgot one thing people change, and the homeless, struggling brother he forced Catherine to cut off years ago. He just walked through the courtroom doors, wearing a $5,000 suit. You won't believe how this ends. The envelope didn't look dangerous. It was a standard cream-colored piece of stationery sitting on the polished mahogany island of the kitchen, right next to the bowl of imported organic lemons. Catherine Sterling stared at it, the steam from her morning coffee curling around her fingers. The house was silent. It was always silent. The sprawling 6,000-square-foot estate in the hills of Connecticut was a masterpiece of modern architecture, glass and steel, but to Catherine it felt more like a mausoleum. She reached for the envelope, but the heavy oak door to the study slammed open. Richard walked in. He was immaculate as always. His charcoal suit was tailored to within an inch of its life, his silver fox hair swept back with precision. He didn't look at her. He walked straight to the espresso machine, the one that cost more than Catherine's first car, and began pressing buttons. "Don't open that," Richard said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Read it after you pack." Catherine froze her hand, hovering over the paper. "Pack, Richard? What are you talking about?" "We have the charity gala tonight." "My dress is—" "You're not going to the gala," Richard interrupted, finally turning to face her. His eyes were cold blue ice. "And you're not staying here. Not tonight. Not ever again." The air left the room. Catherine felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the anxiety that had been her constant companion for the last decade of her marriage. Is this about the credit card bill? Richard, I told you I needed a new winter coat. The old one was, "It's not about the coat, Kate. Stop being pathetic." He took a sip of his espresso, grimacing slightly as if it wasn't up to his standards. "It's about me being done. I'm bored. I'm tired of coming home to this." He gestured vaguely at her at the kitchen of their life. "I've filed for divorce. That envelope contains the petition and a notice to vacate." Catherine gripped the marble counter to steady herself. "Divorce? But we just celebrated our 10th anniversary. You bought me the earrings." "Image, Kate. It's all image, but I'm tired of maintaining it." Richard set the cup down with a sharp clink. "I've met someone else. Someone who fits my future, not my past. Jessica is young, ambitious, and she doesn't mope around the house all day." Jessica, the new marketing VP at Richard's firm. Catherine had hosted her for dinner 2 weeks ago. She had complimented Jessica's shoes. "You can't just kick me out," Catherine whispered, her voice trembling. "This is my home. We built this life together." Richard laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. I built this life. I paid for this house. I paid for the cars. I paid for the clothes on your back. You were a waitress when I found you, remember? You were serving tables at that dive in Jersey, drowning in student debt, with a family of losers dragging you down. I saved you." He walked over to her, invading her personal space, looming over her until she shrank back against the island. "I made you sign a prenuptial agreement, Kate. Do you remember that? Or did you suppress that memory, along with the memory of your trashy brother? That prenup. You said it was just a formality for the board." Catherine stammered, tears stinging her eyes. "You said you'd never use it." I lied, Richard said simply. The prenup states that in the event of a divorce initiated by either party, if there is no infidelity proven against me, and good luck proving anything, my lawyers have already scrubbed the digital footprint you leave with exactly what you brought into the marriage. He leaned in close, his cologne suffocating her. You brought nothing, Kate. 0 assets, negative equity. So that is what you will leave with. He checked his Rolex. You have 1 hour. I've already cancelled your credit cards and the joint checking account. Security will escort you out at 9 a.m. If you take anything that I purchased, jewelry, designer bags, electronics, I will have you arrested for theft. Take your old clothes, the ones from the attic. Catherine stood paralyzed as Richard adjusted his cufflinks, grabbed his briefcase, and walked toward the garage. At the door, he paused. Don't bother calling a lawyer, he called out without looking back. I've already retained the top 3 firms in the state to create a conflict of interest. No one worth hiring can represent you. Goodbye, Kate. The door clicked shut. The silence rushed back in, but this time it was screaming. The rain in Connecticut in November was bone-chilling. Catherine stood on the curb outside the iron gates of the estate, shivering violently. She was wearing a faded denim jacket and a pair of worn sneakers, items she hadn't touched in 10 years, dug out from a dust-covered box in the back of the attic. Beside her sat 2 plastic garbage bags. That was it. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of hosting his parties, managing his moods, soothing his ego, and tolerating his subtle belittlement. It all fit into 2 hefty bags. The security guard, a man named Thomas, whom Catherine had brought coffee to every morning for 3 years, wouldn't even meet her eyes as he closed the gate. Sorry, Mrs. Sterling, he had mumbled. Mr. Sterling's orders. If you don't leave the property line, I have to call the police. Now she was alone. She patted the pocket of her jeans. She had her phone, an old model Richard had discarded years ago, that she kept as a backup, and $34 in cash she had found in a coat pocket. She walked. She walked for 3 miles until she reached the town centre, dragging the plastic bags across the wet pavement. People she knew drove past. She saw the neighbour, Mrs. Gable, in her Range Rover. Mrs. Gable slowed down, stared at the woman looking like a vagrant on the side of the road, realized it was Catherine Sterling, and then sped up, looking straight ahead. Richard's influence ran deep in this town. No one would help her. He would have already spun the narrative. Poor Kate, she had a mental break. Drugs, probably. Or maybe she was stealing from him. Catherine used $20 to buy a bus ticket to the next city over Hartford. She needed to disappear from Richard's orbit. She found a cheap motel that smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach, costing her remaining cash, plus a promise to pay the rest the next day, or be kicked out. Sitting on the lumpy mattress, Catherine stared at the wall. Panic began to set in. Real visceral panic. She had no degree. She had dropped out of college to support Richard while he built his company. She had no resume for the last decade. She had no friends. Richard had slowly filtered them out, claiming they were bad influences or jealous of their success. And she had no family. The family. Richard's voice echoed in her head from 7 years ago. It's them or me, Kate. Your brother is a junkie. Your parents are enablers. They just want my money. If you talk to them again, we are done. She had chosen Richard. She had ghosted her parents. She had ignored the desperate letters from her brother William. She had blocked their numbers. When her father died 3 years ago, she hadn't even gone to the funeral because Richard had booked a trip to the Maldives that same week and said she couldn't miss it. Guilt, heavy and suffocating, crushed her. She was alone. because she had chosen to be alone. She deserved this. Her stomach growled, a painful reminder that she hadn't eaten since the night before. She looked at her phone. 14% battery. She needed help. She needed a lawyer. But Richard was right. Without money, she couldn't get a shark. And she needed a shark to fight Richard Sterling. Her fingers trembled as she opened the Contacts app. It was empty mostly. Just Richard, the house line, the country club, the stylist. She went to the keypad. She closed her eyes, trying to summon a number from memory. A number she hadn't dialed in 7 years. 55501928844. Would he even have the same number? Would he even answer? William had been in and out of rehab when she last saw him. He was volatile, angry, and hated Richard with passion. If he was even alive. She pressed the call button. Ring. 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 Yeah. The voice was deep, rough, and impatient. Catherine's breath hitched. William. Silence on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. Kate, it's me. She choked out the tears, finally spilling over. It's Kate. Kate, Jesus, I haven't heard from you in... Do you know Dad died thinking you hated him? The words were like a physical blow. Catherine sobbed, curling into a ball on the dirty motel bedspread. I know, Will. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Why are you calling now? Did your husband finally let you off the leash? The bitterness in his voice was acid. He threw me out, Will. He served me papers. I'm in a motel in Hartford, Lynn. I have $14 and 2 bags of clothes. He said I'm leaving with nothing. He took everything. There was a long pause. Catherine could hear background noise on the other end. Voices, the hum of an engine, maybe wind. She braced herself for him to hang up. To tell her to go to hell, to tell her that she made her bed, and now she had to sleep in it. He threw you out? William asked, his voice suddenly very quiet, very controlled. Yes. And he said you get nothing. Yes, he has a prenup. He has lawyers. He says I'm worthless. Stay where you are, William said. Text me the address. Well, I can't ask you for money. I know you struggle, I didn't know who else to call. I just needed to hear a voice that didn't hate me. I don't hate you, Katie. I never hated you. I hated him. There was a rustling sound, like he was moving around. And I don't struggle. Not anymore. What do you mean? I mean, a lot can change in 7 years, Kate. Just like you changed for the worse, I changed for the better. Send me the address. I'm in New York. I can be in Hartford in 2 hours. You have a car? She asked, surprised. The last she knew, William had sold his beat-up Honda for bail money. Yeah, William said, a strange, dark humor in his tone. I have a car. I'll see you soon, Kate. And don't worry about Richard. He thinks he's playing chess, but he just knocked over the wrong king. He hung up. Catherine stared at the phone. She didn't understand. William sounded different, stronger. But what could he do? Richard was worth nearly $50 million. William was, well, William. But he was coming. And for the first time, that cool Maday, the cold rain outside, didn't feel quite so fatal. The neon sign of the Starlight Motor Inn buzzed with the irritating hum of a dying fly. The S and the T were burnt out, leaving the sign to read Our Light, which felt appropriate because Catherine felt like the light had gone out of her world entirely. She She sat on the curb under the narrow overhang of the motel office, hugging her knees. The motel manager, a man with grease stains on his shirt and suspicion in his eyes, had told her she couldn't loiter in the lobby. So she waited in the damp cold, watching the headlights of passing cars slice through the drizzle. Every car that slowed down made her heart hammer against her ribs. Was it Richard? Had he changed his mind? Or worse, had he sent someone to harass her to ensure she was truly miserable? Richard's cruelty wasn't usually physical. He didn't hit, he eroded. But tonight, stripped of her status and her home, she feared the unknown. 2 hours passed, then 3. Doubt began to gnaw at her. Maybe William wasn't coming. Maybe it was a cruel joke. Revenge for 7 years of silence. I'm coming, he had said. But addicts made promises they couldn't keep all the time. She knew that. She had lived through his 20s. Just as she was about to drag her garbage bags back into the smell of the room, a vehicle turned into the cracked parking lot. It wasn't the rusted Honda Civic she remembered. It wasn't a taxi. It was a matte black Mercedes-AMG G63. The kind of car that looked like a tank dressed in a tuxedo. It growled low and menacingly as it rolled over the potholes, the LED headlights cutting through the gloom like surgical lasers. Catherine shrank back against the brick wall. Richard. It had to be. This was exactly the kind of aggressive display of wealth Richard loved. He had found her. He was here to mock her. The SUV stopped right in front of her. The engine cut and the heavy door swung open. A man stepped out. He was tall, over 6'2", filling out a black trench coat that looked like it cost more than the entire motel. He wore dark jeans and heavy leather boots. He didn't have an umbrella. He just walked through the rain, unbothered by it. He walked around the hood of the car and stopped 5 feet from her. Catherine squinted her eyes, adjusting to the shadows. The man's face was sharp, angular, covered in a well-groomed, heavy beard. His hair was short-styled, but the eyes, hazel-flecked with green, those hadn't changed. Will, she whispered the name, barely escaping her throat. He didn't smile. He looked at her, really looked at her. He took in the wet sneakers, the faded denim jacket that was too thin for the weather, the trembling hands and the black plastic trash bags sitting in the puddle next to her feet. His jaw tightened so hard, she saw the muscle feather beneath his skin. The look on his face wasn't anger at her. It was a pure, cold fury directed at the universe. Get in the car, Kate, he said. His voice was deeper than she remembered, raspy, with a gravel that spoke of long nights and hard work. I don't have money for... I said get in the car. He moved then, closing the distance. He didn't hug her. Not yet. He bent down and picked up the garbage bags. He paused, feeling the weight of them. Is this it? Yes, she said, looking down at her shoes. That's everything. He let out a short, sharp breath through his nose, threw the bags into the back seat, and then opened the passenger door for her. Get in. It's heated. Catherine climbed in. The interior smelled of expensive leather, and something woodsy like cedar and sandalwood. The warmth enveloped her instantly. The dashboard was a cockpit of digital screens. William climbed into the driver's seat. He didn't start the car immediately. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, staring out at the rain-slicked windshield. He did this to you, William said. It wasn't a question. I let him, Catherine replied softly, the shame burning hotter than the heater. I'm sorry, Will. I'm so sorry about Dad. I'm sorry I wasn't there. William turned to look at her. The hardness in his eyes softened just a fraction. He reached out his hand, hesitating, then gently touched the side of her face. His hand was warm, calloused, a working man's hand. Dad knew Kate, William said, his voice thick. Before he passed, he told me, "She's not gone, Will. She's just trapped. When she gets free, you be there." Catherine broke. A sob ripped through her chest, a guttural sound of 10 years of repressed grief. She leaned into his hand, weeping. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I thought he hated me." "He never hated you. He hated Richard. We all saw what he was. A vampire. He drained you, Kate. Look at you. You used to light up a room. Now you look like you're apologizing for taking up space." He started the engine, the V8 roaring to life. "Where are we going?" she asked, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I can't go to New York. Richard, he has people. He'll find me." William shifted the car into gear. He looked at her with a grim determination she had never seen in her junkie brother before. "Let him find us," William said. "I'm counting on it. We aren't going to New York. We're going to the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Hartford. I need a shower and you need a steak. And then we're going to talk about how to bury Richard Sterling." The presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton was larger than the first apartment Catherine and Richard had shared. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city one, thick velvet drapes, and a bathroom filled with marble. Catherine sat on the edge of the plush beige sofa, wearing a thick white robe provided by the hotel. She had showered for 45 minutes, scrubbing the smell of the motel and the feeling of Richard's judgment off her skin. Room service had arrived 20 minutes ago. A cart laden with food filet mignon, roasted asparagus truffle, mashed potatoes, and a bottle of sparkling water sat untouched. William was standing by the window talking on his phone. He had shed the trench coat, revealing a fitted black t-shirt that showed off arms covered in ink. But these weren't prison tattoos. They were intricate artistic sleeves. He looked powerful, dangerous even. "I don't care what his caseload is, Jeremiah," William was saying into the phone. His tone was authoritative, brooking no argument. "Tell him it's me. Tell him it's the Sterling divorce." "Yes." "That's Sterling. No, I want the scorched earth package. I want forensic accountants. I want private investigators. I want to know where he buys his socks and who he sleeps with on Tuesdays." "Good. Have him here at 8 o'clock a.m. He hung up and turned to Catherine. "Eat," he commanded gently. "You look like a stiff breeze could knock you over." Catherine picked up a fork, her hand trembling. "Will, how is this possible?" "The car, this suite. You were working at the auto body shop on 4th Street when I left." William walked over and poured himself a glass of water. He sat in the armchair opposite her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "I hit rock bottom about 6 months after you cut me off," he said, his voice steady. "I overdosed. Woke up in the ER with a nurse telling me I was lucky to have a pulse. Something clicked. I realized if I died, Richard won. He'd get to tell everyone, see her family is trash. So I checked myself into a state rehab. Stayed 6 months." He paused, looking at his hands. "When I got out, I went back to the shop. I kept my head down. But you know me, Kate. I always liked tinkering. I started messing around with the logistics software the shop used for ordering parts. It was garbage, slow buggy. So I wrote a patch for it in my spare time." Catherine's eyes widened. "You wrote software? You barely finished high school." "I have a lot of time to read when I'm Turns out I have a knack for code. The owner of the shop showed it to a vendor. The vendor showed it to a distributor. Long story short, I built a platform called VectorFlow. It optimizes supply chains for heavy trucking. 2 years ago, I sold the majority stake to a conglomerate in Silicon Valley. He took a sip of water. I kept 49% and the CEO position. The company is valued at $400 million. Catherine dropped her fork. It clattered against the china plate. 400 soared. Million? Give or take. Depends on the market. He shrugged, as if discussing the price of milk. The point isn't the money, Kate. The point is the leverage. Richard thinks he's a big fish because he owns a mid-sized hedge fund in Connecticut. In my world, Richard is plankton. He has lawyers, Will, Catherine said, the fear creeping back in. He told me he hired the top 3 firms in the state just to create a conflict of interest, so I couldn't hire them. He said I'd have to get a public defender. William laughed. It was a dark, satisfied sound. That's a cute trick. It's a standard bully move. It works on people who don't have resources. But here's the thing about Richard. He thinks locally. He thinks Connecticut is the center of the universe. William stood up and walked to his briefcase on the desk. The man I just got off the phone with is Jeremiah Stone. Catherine gasped. Even she knew that name. Jeremiah Stone wasn't a divorce lawyer. He was a war machine. He was based in New York City and was famous for handling the divorces of A-list celebrities and Wall Street titans. He was known as the Butcher of Fifth Avenue. Jeremiah Stone won't come to Hartford, Catherine said. He costs $2,000 an hour. $3,000, William corrected. And he's coming because I'm his biggest client. He handles all my corporate litigation, and he owes me a favor. William walked back to her and crouched down so he was eye level with her. Richard wants to play games with money, fine. We'll play. He wants to say you brought nothing into the marriage. We'll see about that. But first you need to understand something. He looked intense, his eyes searching hers. You have to be willing to fight. Jeremiah can be the sword, and I can be the shield. But you have to be the one to wield it. You have to want to take him down. Not just for the money, but for the 10 years he stole from you. For the fact that he made you miss Dad's funeral. For the fact that he made you feel small. Catherine looked at her brother. She saw the man he had become, strong, resilient, a survivor. He had climbed out of hell. She thought about Richard's face when he told her to leave. The smugness, the certainty that she was weak, the certainty that she would crawl away and die in a hole. She thought about the nothing he said she was worth. A small cold flame ignited in her chest. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was anger. Pure, unadulterated rage. She picked up a piece of the steak and put it in her mouth. She chewed slowly, swallowing the expensive meat. She took a sip of the water. Then she looked at William. He kept a journal, Catherine said softly. William raised an eyebrow. What a... Richard. He's paranoid. He kept a physical journal in a safe in the floor of his closet. He writes down everything. Not just his feelings, he doesn't have those. He writes down his victories. The deals he closed. The people he screwed over. The offshore accounts he didn't declare to the IRS. Because he thinks he's smarter than the government. William's smile grew wide. It was a predatory smile. Do you know the combination? It's his birthday, Catherine said. He's a narcissist. Of course it's his birthday. Did you take it? No, Catherine said. I couldn't get to the safe. is. And I know that if he finds out I have a real lawyer, the first thing he'll do is try to destroy it. William stood up and checked his watch. Then we have to move fast. Jeremiah will be here in the morning to file an emergency injunction to freeze his assets and seal the marital home as a crime scene potential. But we need to get you ready. Ready for what? For court, William said. The preliminary hearing is in 2 days. Richard set it fast because he thought you wouldn't show up, or that you'd show up looking like a homeless person, and the judge would grant him everything by default. William walked to the closet of the suite and pulled out a garment bag he had brought in. He expects a broken woman in rags, William said. He unzipped the bag. Inside hung a structured navy blue power suit, clearly Italian, and a silk blouse. We're going to give him a queen. The morning sun over Hartford did not bring warmth. It brought a harsh, exposing light. Inside the presidential suite, the atmosphere was surgical. The room had been transformed from a luxury dwelling into a command center. Jeremiah Stone arrived at exactly 7:55 a.m. He was not what Catherine expected. She had pictured a shouting, table-pounding TV lawyer. Jeremiah was a small man, perhaps in his late 60s, with rimless spectacles and a suit that was so perfectly tailored it seemed to be a second skin. He spoke in a whisper that forced everyone to lean in, effectively sucking the oxygen out of the room. "Mrs. Sterling," Jeremiah said, taking her hand. His grip was dry and firm, like shaking hands with a piece of parchment paper. "William has told me the basics. I am here to discuss the variables." He sat at the dining table, spreading out a series of documents William had printed. "Richard has filed in Connecticut Family Court." Jeremiah began, his voice devoid of emotion. "He has retained Miller Halloway and Finch. They are competent bullies. They rely on the strategy of financial starvation. They cut off access to funds, drag out the proceedings, and wait for the spouse to accept a pittance just to buy groceries." Catherine nodded, staring at her hands. He cancelled the credit cards. He emptied the joint account. "Standard operating procedure," Jeremiah said, waving a hand dismissively. "But Richard made a mistake, a fatal one." "What mistake?" Catherine asked. "He assumed you were isolated," Jeremiah said, looking at William. "He assumed the status quo was you having zero resources. The moment William entered the picture, the balance of power shifted. But we must be careful. If Richard knows I am involved, or that William is backing you before we step into that courtroom tomorrow, he will panic. And when men like Richard panic, assets disappear. That journal you mentioned, it will be in a shredder." Catherine felt a cold knot in her stomach. "So what do? "We ambush him," William said from the corner. He was pouring coffee, his movements precise. "We walk in blind, no prior notice of counsel representation." "Exactly," Jeremiah nodded. "Technically, I am not admitted to the Connecticut bar, but I have filed a pro-HAS vice motion this morning under a sealed docket. The judge has granted it, but the electronic notification won't hit Richard's lawyers until the hearing starts. As far as they know, you are appearing pro-SE representing yourself." Jeremiah leaned forward, his eyes sharpening. "Now tell me about the journal. Specifically, what is in it?" Catherine closed her eyes, trying to transport herself back to the cold silence of Richard's study. "He writes down the real numbers. He has a second set of books for his consultancy firm. He brags about it in the journal. He calls it the Shadow Ledger. He lists account numbers in the Cayman Islands and Zurich. He also writes about the people he's bribed. Zoning commissioners, inspectors." Jeremiah's eyebrows raised a fraction of an inch. "Bribery that elevates this from a divorce case to a federal RICO case. This isn't just leverage, Mrs. Sterling. This is a nuclear warhead. But we can't get it, Catherine said, her voice rising in panic. It's in the floor safe. Only he has the code. If I go back to the house, he'll have me arrested. We don't need you to go back, Jeremiah said calmly. He pulled a fresh document from his briefcase. While Richard is busy gloating in court tomorrow, expecting to watch you beg for alimony, a team of forensic auditors accompanied by a sheriff's deputy will execute an ex parte seizure order on the marital residence. How? Catherine asked, stunned. Because, Jeremiah smiled, a thin, wintry expression. I spent the last 2 hours on the phone with a federal judge I went to law school with, based on your affidavit regarding the bribery and tax evasion. We aren't just looking for marital assets. We are securing potential evidence of a crime. The element of surprise is absolute. Richard will be sitting at the plaintiff's table when his phone starts buzzing with the news that the FBI is sawing through his floorboards. William walked over and placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder. He told you to leave with nothing, Kate. He forgot that nothing is just a blank slate. You can write whatever you want on it. Catherine looked at the documents, the subpoenas, the seizure orders, the affidavits. For 10 years she had been told she was stupid, that she didn't understand business, that she was just a decoration. I want to sign, Catherine said, her voice steadying. Where do I sign? Jeremiah uncapped a heavy fountain pen and pushed the papers toward her. Right here, Mrs. Sterling. And remember, tomorrow you do not speak unless the judge asks you a direct question. You let me be the monster. You just be the wife who survived. The hallway of the Hartford Superior Court echoed with the low murmur of misery. It was a place where love went to die, strangled by billable hours and custody schedules. Richard Sterling stood near the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B, checking his reflection in the glass of a fire extinguisher case. He looked impeccable. His suit was a midnight blue, bespoke number. His tie, a silk Hermes. He checked his Rolex. 8:58 a.m. Standing next to him was Brent Miller, his lead attorney. Miller was a large man who smelled of expensive cologne and overconfidence. She's not going to show, Miller chuckled, checking his phone. It's been 24 hours. She has no money, no car. She's probably crying in a shelter somewhere. We'll get a default judgment by 9:15, and you'll be on the golf course by 10 o'clock. Richard smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. I almost hope she does show. I want to see the look on her face when the judge enforces the prenup. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. You're a hard man, Richard. Miller laughed. I'm a businessman, Brent. Emotions are for people who can't afford logic. At that moment, the elevator doors at the end of the long corridor chimed. The hallway was relatively quiet, so the sound of the footsteps was distinct. Not the shuffling of a defeated woman in sneakers, but the sharp, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of high-end stilettos striking the terrazzo floor. Richard turned a frown, creasing his forehead. A woman turned the corner. For a second, Richard didn't recognize her. He was looking for the slumped shoulders, the messy bun, the nervous ticking of her hands. The woman approaching him was walking with a predator's grace. She wore a navy blue power suit that cinched at the waist, tailored to perfection. Her hair, usually pulled back in a utilitarian ponytail, was blown out in sleek, shining waves that cascaded over her shoulders. She wore oversized sunglasses, shielding her eyes. Behind her walked a man. He was huge, dressed in a black suit that strained against his shoulders. His beard groomed his presence, radiating a quiet, menacing violence. And flanked on her other side was a small, elderly man carrying a battered leather briefcase. face. Richard blinked. Kate. Catherine didn't stop. She didn't even look at him. She walked straight past him, the scent of her perfume, a scent he hadn't let her buy because it was too aggressive wafting in her wake. Catherine, Richard barked, stepping into her path. Who paid for that suit? You're using my credit cards. I told you they were cancelled. She stopped then. She slowly removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were clear. There were no red rims, no tears. Just a flat, terrifying calm. Excuse me, she said. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It was cool and projected. You're blocking the entrance to the courtroom, Mr. Sterling. Richard was taken aback. She hadn't called him Mr. Sterling since the day they met. He looked at the large man behind her. He narrowed his eyes. The beard threw him off. The expensive clothes threw him off. But the sneer. He knew that sneer. William. Richard laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. You brought your junkie brother? What is he going to do, rob the bailiff? William stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He leaned down, invading Richard's personal space, just enough to be uncomfortable, but not enough to be assault. Hello, Richard, William said. I'd ask how you've been, but I've seen your financials. You're over-leveraged on the chaotic mid-cap market. Risky. Richard's jaw dropped. What? Counsel. The small man with the briefcase interrupted his voice like dry leaves. He looked at Brent Miller. We should proceed inside. The Honorable Judge Halloway hates delays. Brent Miller looked at the small man. His face went pale. He recognized him. Every lawyer on the East Coast recognized him. Jeremiah Stone. Miller whispered, the blood draining from his face. What are you doing here? I'm here to represent my client, Mrs. Sterling, Jeremiah said pleasantly. Shall we? Jeremiah held the door open for Catherine. She walked through without looking back. Richard stood frozen in the hallway. Who the hell is Jeremiah Stone? He demanded, turning to his lawyer. Miller looked like he was about to be sick. He's the guy who stripped the CEO of Ariscorp of everything but his socks last year. Richard, if he's here, this isn't a divorce hearing anymore. It's an execution. Richard felt a flicker of genuine fear for the first time in years. Fix it, he hissed. I pay you to fix it. They entered the courtroom. The bailiff called all rise. The proceedings began with the usual administrative drone, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Judge Halloway, a stern woman with zero patience for theatrics, looked over her glasses. We are here for a preliminary hearing on Sterling versus Sterling. Mr. Miller, you represent the plaintiff, and I see a notice of appearance just filed for the defense. Yes, Your Honor. Jeremiah Stone stood up. Jeremiah Stone appearing for Mrs. Catherine Sterling. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Stone, you're a long way from Manhattan. Justice knows no geography, Your Honor, Stone said smoothly. Very well. Mr. Miller, state your initial motion. Brent Miller stood up, tugging at his collar. Your Honor, simply put, we are asking to uphold the prenuptial agreement signed 10 years ago. It states clearly that upon dissolution of the marriage, assets remain separate. Mrs. Sterling entered with 0 assets, and thus she leaves with 0 assets. We ask for an immediate order to vacate the premises, although she has already left, and a waiver of spousal support. The judge looked at Jeremiah. Mr. Stone. Jeremiah didn't look at his notes. He looked at Richard. Your Honor, we are not contesting the existence of the prenup. Richard let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Good. Stone is just here to negotiate a settlement. However, Jeremiah continued, his voice dropping an octave. mutual agreement requires full financial disclosure to be valid. If one party hides assets during the signing or during the marriage, the contract is null and void due to fraud. Objection, Miller shouted. There is no evidence of fraud. Mr. Sterling is a respected member of the community. Mr. Sterling, Jeremiah said, turning to face Richard, certified in his financial affidavit yesterday that his net worth is $48 million. That is correct, Miller snapped. Then perhaps, Jeremiah said, picking up a piece of paper, Mr. Sterling can explain why a wire transfer of $2 million was initiated this morning at 8:05 a.m. from his consulting account to an entity in the Cayman Islands named Blue Heron Holdings. Richard froze. He had done that transfer from his phone in the car. How did they know? And Jeremiah continued, relentless. We would like to introduce into evidence the fact that at this very moment, officers from the Fairfield County Sheriff's Department are executing a search warrant at the Sterling estate to secure a safe located in the floor of the master bedroom closet. Richard stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. You can't do that. That's my house. Sit down, Mr. Sterling. Judge Halloway barked, banging her gavel. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition, Miller pleaded, though he sounded desperate. It is not fishing if we know exactly where the fish are, Your Honor, Jeremiah said calmly. Mrs. Sterling has provided a sworn affidavit regarding the contents of that safe. Illegal ledgers, evidence of bribery of public officials, and proof that the nothing Mrs. Sterling brought into this marriage was actually her silence. Silence she is no longer willing to keep. The courtroom was deadly silent. Richard looked at Catherine. For the first time he saw her. He didn't see the waitress. He didn't see the trophy wife. He saw the woman who knew where the bodies were buried. Catherine met his gaze. She didn't smile. She just raised her chin ever so slightly. Mr. Miller, Judge Halloway, said her voice icy. I am granting a temporary restraining order on all of Mr. Sterling's assets, domestic and foreign. And I am ordering Mr. Sterling to surrender his passport immediately to the bailiff. If there is a federal investigation pending regarding that safe, he is a flight risk. Passport, Richard sputtered. I have a business trip to London on Friday. Not anymore, you don't, the judge said. Bailiff, secure the passport. As the bailiff approached, Richard William leaned forward from the gallery bench behind the defense table. Don't worry, Richard, William whispered, loud enough for only Richard to hear. I know a good public defender. He might be able to help you keep the suit, but I doubt it. The unraveling of Richard Sterling did not happen in a blaze of glory. It happened with the pathetic whimper of a balloon losing its air. 2 hours after Judge Halloway ordered the seizure of his passport, Richard sat in a small, windowless conference room in the courthouse. The air conditioning was broken, and a bead of sweat made a slow, humiliating track down his temple. Across the table sat Catherine William and Jeremiah Sterling. Richard's expensive lawyers were frantically whispering in the corner on calls with criminal defense attorneys. The news had just come in from the estate. The sheriff's deputies, accompanied by a federal agent, had drilled the safe. They had the journals. They had the hard drives. Richard looked at Catherine. He tried to summon the old glare, the one that used to make her apologize for things she hadn't done. But he couldn't find it. He just looked tired. Older. Kate, he said, his voice cracking. You can't let them take everything. If the IRS gets involved, the company, the assets, it'll all be frozen for years. We need to make a deal. Now. Catherine sat perfectly still. She wasn't looking at him with hate. It was something far worse for a narcissist to witness indifference. "There is no we, Richard," she said softly. "You made that very clear yesterday morning." "I was angry," Richard pleaded, leaning forward, his hands shaking on the table. "I didn't mean it. We can work this out. I'll fire Jessica. She means nothing to me. I'll give you the house. I'll give you a monthly stipend. Just tell your lawyer to withdraw the fraud motion. Tell them you made a mistake about the bribery." Catherine glanced at William. Her brother was watching Richard with a look of clinical curiosity, like a scientist observing a bug under a microscope. "You don't get to it, do you?" William said, breaking his silence. "Jessica is already gone, Richard. My team saw her leaving your office building an hour ago with a box of personal items. She blocked your number before she even got to the elevator. You're radioactive." Richard flinched, as if slapped. Jeremiah Stone opened a leather folder. "Here is the reality, Mr. Sterling. The prenuptial agreement is dead, voided by your fraudulent non-disclosure of assets. That puts us back to equitable distribution. However, given the impending federal indictment for tax evasion and bribery, which by the way carries a minimum sentence of 5 to 10 years, your ability to earn future income is zero." Jeremiah slid a single piece of paper across the table. "Mrs. Sterling is offering you a lifeline. Not because you deserve it, but because she wants this over today." Richard snatched the paper. He read it, his eyes widening in horror. This gives her everything," he sputtered. "The liquid cash, the stock portfolio, the Westport property. You're leaving me with the debt and the legal fees. We are leaving you with your freedom to fight your criminal case without a contentious divorce. Distract your attention," Jeremiah corrected. "If you sign this, Catherine walks away with the secure assets. If you don't, we proceed to trial. We will testify. And by the time the feds are done with you, you won't even have enough money to buy a suit for your sentencing hearing." Richard looked at his lawyer, Brent Miller. Miller didn't look up. He was busy typing on his phone, likely looking for a new client who could actually pay him. Richard looked back at Catherine. "I made you," he whispered venomously. "You were nothing." Catherine stood up. She smoothed the front of her navy suit. She walked over to the window, or where a window would be if they weren't in a basement conference room, and turned to face him. "You didn't make me, Richard. You interrupted me. I was a person before you, and I am a person after you. The only thing you did was pause my life for 10 years. She leaned in, her voice steady and strong. "And regarding the nothing I brought into the marriage, I brought my integrity, I brought my loyalty, I brought my love. You squandered all of it. So now I'm taking the only thing you actually value. I'm taking the money." She tossed a pen onto the document. "Sign it, or I go to the district attorney myself." Richard Sterling, the man who thought he was a king, picked up the cheap plastic pen. His hand shook violently. He looked at the paper. He looked at the door, realizing there was no one walking through it to save him. He signed. 6 months later, the charity gala was in full swing. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in New York City was a sea of diamonds and tuxedos. But this time, Catherine wasn't standing in the shadows, holding Richard's drink, while he charmed the donors. She was on the stage. "Thank you all for coming," Catherine said into the microphone. She looked radiant, wearing a gown she had bought with her own money, her hair loose and free. The Sterling Hale Foundation was created for a simple purpose: to provide legal and financial aid to women trapped in financially abusive marriages, to give a voice to those who have been told they are worth nothing. The crowd erupted in applause. In the back of the room, William leaned against a pillar, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He watched his sister command the room. She wasn't the broken girl in the rain anymore. She was a force of nature. A man in a tuxedo walked up to William. It was Jeremiah Stone, looking as dour as ever. "She's doing well," Jeremiah noted. "She's doing better than well." William smiled. "She's finally herself." "And Richard?" Jeremiah asked, though he already knew the answer. "Sentenced last week," William said, taking a sip of his drink. 4 years in federal prison for tax evasion and wire fraud. The irony is, because he signed the settlement with Kate, the government seized what was left, which was basically just his ego and a lease to Porsche. He went in broke. "Justice," Jeremiah murmured. "No," William said, pushing off the pillar as Catherine waved at him from the stage. "Justice is him in a cell. This, watching her live her life without fear. That's not justice. That's victory." Catherine walked down the steps of the stage, the spotlight following her. She saw her brother, the man she had almost left behind, the man who came back for her when no one else would. She walked through the crowd, ignoring the wealthy suitors and the society photographers. She reached William and took his arm. "Ready to go?" she asked. "You're the boss." William grinned. "Where to?" "Let's get a burger." Catherine laughed, sound light and free. "I'm starving and I'm done with fancy food." They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving the golden cage far behind them, stepping out into the cool, limitless night of New York City. Catherine Sterling had left her marriage with exactly what she brought into it. Nothing of Richard's, but she had gained everything that mattered. She had her family, she had her freedom, and she had the undeniable truth that she was and always had been enough. Richard Sterling thought the value of a person was written on a bank statement. He thought he could discard his wife like an old receipt, because on paper she had nothing. But he made the classic mistake of a bully. He forgot that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall, but the ones who climb back up. Catherine didn't just survive. She evolved. She turned her pain into power and her trauma into a shield for others. And Richard. He learned the hard way that when you strip everything away from a person, you don't leave them with nothing. You leave them with nothing to lose. And that makes them the most dangerous opponent of all. What a roller coaster, right? It just goes to show that you should never underestimate the quiet ones. What did you think of William's revenge? Was it too harsh, or did Richard get exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you would have signed that settlement or sent him straight to trial. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more dramatic, real-life inspired tales coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.